Scream Factory has just released the 2005 Wes Craven film, Cursed, on a collector's edition Blu-ray.
Watch out!
They unleashed an ancient evil.
We were attacked.
Now, their friends are dying, and the curse is spreading.
I have to stop it.
From the master of terror, Wes Craven, Cursed, rated PG-13, in theaters February 25th.
It's well known in horror circles that the making of this film was a nightmare for all involved, thanks to the massive interference from producers Bob and Harvey Weinstein. But nearly 20 years later, has the time come for a reevaluation of the film? Or is this cursed production better left forgotten? Well, let's rip this sucker open and take a closer look. Minor spoilers are ahead, so beware. Cursed is about an orphan brother and sister who live in LA. Ellie works in the entertainment industry and her brother Jimmy is a typical high school nerd. So they get into a car wreck on their way home one night and are attacked by a werewolf. Now the third person involved in the wreck, played by Shannon Elizabeth from 13 Ghosts, isn't so lucky. She's ripped apart in a scene that looks a little dodgy, thanks in part to the improved clarity with this 4K restoration, but it's effective enough. So Ellie and Jimmy immediately start to wolf out and have strange experiences, as the werewolf that attacked them wreaks havoc throughout Hollywood. One sequence has the beast stalking and attacking someone in a parking garage. The character is played by the singer Maya, who I had never even heard of back then. Is she even still around? But I really love this entire sequence, which is expertly handled by Wes Craven. Oh, and I have to mention the bathroom scene, which is just unintentionally hilarious. So at one point, Ellie rushes into a bathroom stall after wolfing out, and a nosy lady wants to make sure she's okay.
No!
But this woman just won't quit. Something is clearly off with Ellie, and I would have gotten the hell out of there, but not this lady.
Can I help?
My god, just leave her alone. Anyway, Jimmy and Ellie must figure out the identity of the werewolf in order to break their curse, which involves the appearance of a 5-point pentagram on their palm. Now this was actually a nod to an old 1987 series, Werewolf, which I loved as a kid. So the suspects are plentiful, and the climax takes place in a nightclub with a wax museum theme. And it actually features Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Pinhead. How cool is that? I still remember how excited I was when Curse was first announced in the early 2000s. Here you had the legendary Wes Craven reuniting with Scream writer Kevin Williamson to make a werewolf film. And the effects were going to be done by Rick Baker of American Werewolf in London fame. How could you possibly screw that up? Enter Bob and Harvey Weinstein, the producers in charge of the film. These guys were notorious for screwing up genre films with their interference and idiotic demands, and Cursed was no exception. After Wes Craven shot about 85% of the film, the Weinsteins decided to shut down production and basically start over from scratch. Nearly the entire cast was replaced, including effects legend Rick Baker. The official story is that Baker decided to suddenly retire, but it's obvious that the Weinsteins drove him out. So the film was basically remade, and KMB Effects were hired to replace Rick Baker. But the Weinsteins, in their infinite wisdom, rejected most of their work and replaced it with early 2000s CGI, which they felt looked better. Makes perfect sense, right? So after all of these reshoots, the Weinsteins ordered even more reshoots to change the ending of what they had already reshot. It's crazy. Issue number 241 of Fangoria magazine, released back in 2005 before the release of Cursed, documents all of this craziness and includes Wes Craven's thoughts on everything. Craven said, quote, "The idea of shooting for 11 weeks, getting great performances, and having 10 weeks of that just thrown away is really hard. It's like a death in the family. It's wrenching." End quote. The film finally limped into theaters in February of 2005. But as a final insult, the Weinsteins had the R-rated movie cut down to a PG-13 rating. The movie tanked horribly and made just $19 million in the United States. Keep in mind, with all of the reshoots, they ended up spending close to $90 million on this thing. My god. I hated the Weinsteins long before all the sexual harassment stuff came to light, and the making of this film had a large part in that. In the Fangoria article, Craven mentioned that he could have done 2 or 3 films in the amount of time he spent on Cursed. And that's what bothers me so much about this film, the wasted potential of one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. What other movies could he have given us had he not been bogged down for 3 years making Cursed? It's even more tragic knowing just how little time Wes Craven had left before passing away from brain cancer. Seriously, screw the Weinsteins. And the funny thing is, I actually read the original version of the script, the version that they shot 85% of before the plug was pulled, and it would have made an excellent movie, far better than what we ended up with. It's just insane. I hope one day we're able to see that footage, even in its incomplete form. Now, having said all that, it's important to try to judge the release version of Cursed on its own merits. It's hard, knowing the backstory and knowing what could have been. So what was good about this movie? Well, even with all the drama, Craven's direction is fantastic. He didn't just phone it in here, he actually tried. And as I said earlier, the parking garage sequence was top-notch. Speaking of which, this release includes both the PG-13 version and the unrated cut. Well, in the unrated version, the werewolf kills Maya off-screen, but in that old Fangoria magazine of mine, it actually included a photo of her mangled body. Why wasn't that used? The werewolf design, when it's not CGI, looks awesome. The cast does a great job, and I liked Marco Beltrami's score. The basic plot of a werewolf loose in LA is interesting, and I like the underlying theme of monsters in Hollywood. It's especially fascinating coming from a film produced by the Weinsteins. And I have to say, for the first time ever, I actually had a good time with this. I hadn't watched it all the way through in many years, and it really wasn't as bad as I remembered it being. Now, as far as issues, the dated CGI really hurts the film. One transformation scene in particular looks especially bad. And don't get me started on the CGI werewolf dog. So cute, though. There's some goofy moments throughout the film, including a shot where the werewolf actually flips someone off. Could that have been Craven's response to the Weinsteins? Also, this is just my personal opinion, but I don't really care for Jesse Eisenberg. No offense to the actor, I've just always found him to be kind of annoying in everything he's in. Especially here. It's a shame because I usually love nerdy characters in horror films. So yeah, it's a flawed film that could have been so much better. But even in this studio-tampered version, it's not too bad. I wouldn't call this a misunderstood classic or anything, but overall, I had a good time with it. Scream Factory has included two versions of the film with this release, the PG-13 version and the unrated version. Both cuts have been restored in 4K and the movie looks amazing, honestly. Colors are vibrant and that beautiful natural film grain is evident. This is a really good-looking movie. Special features are a little lackluster. The unrated version includes an audio commentary with K&B effects artist Greg Nicotero, but only on 4 scenes. The bulk of the extras are on the first disc, with the PG-13 cut. We get a trailer and 4 vintage featurettes, ranging from 5.5 to 8 minutes. These are all studio-friendly puff pieces, with the cast and crew putting a happy face on the nightmarish production.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a fun movie to make.
All of this stuff was included with the original DVD release. New to this release are 2 interviews. One is with actor Derek Mears, who played the werewolf. It runs 14 minutes and has some excellent information on the original shoot and the reshoots. We also get the origin story of that infamous flipping the bird scene. The second interview is with editor Patrick Lussier, which runs 18 minutes. He shares lots of fascinating information and really delves into the mess behind the scenes. Both of their interviews are fantastic, but I wanted more. Cursed is just crying out for an in-depth making-of documentary, but we didn't get that with this release. We didn't even get a full audio commentary, which would have been fascinating to hear. And worst of all, none of that fabled lost footage from the original shoot is included. Now, Scream Factory said they tried to get it, but weren't able to, so maybe it's a rights thing. But if you aren't going to include this footage with this release, you better make up for it with other features. But all we got was 2 interviews. And this is labeled as a collector's edition. The lack of new in-depth special features is pretty disappointing, especially on such a troubled film with a fascinating backstory like Cursed. The slipcover includes the original theatrical art. Reversible art is included, with this same art on one side and the unrated version of it on the other. Now here's the weird thing. I pre-ordered this release and got a poster with brand new art from Colin Murdoch. The poster looks amazing and shows off the awesome werewolf from the film. But why wasn't this art included on the slipcover? Scream Factory always includes the new art on the slip, or at least on the reversible cover art. Why didn't they do that here? Cursed is a flawed film, but it's better than I remembered. Now the picture quality is flawless, but the special features are lackluster, I have to say. It's honestly the first time I've ever been a little disappointed with Scream Factory. It seems like they tried to get the original footage, as they stated, but when their efforts failed, they just kinda gave up on this release. It's really too bad, because this film is just crying out for more features. As a die-hard Wes Craven fan, it's a no-brainer for me to pick this up. And if you don't already own this film, I'd also recommend it. But if you're just looking to upgrade based on new special features alone, I'd definitely give this one some thought before purchasing it.